Hi there, welcome to Fantasy Hub. I'm Mia, your storyteller. Today's story is filled with heartache, discovery, and a twist you won't see coming. So let's begin.
They say money can't buy happiness, but let me tell you something. It sure can buy a pretty convincing disguise for misery. My name is Lauren Ross, and until 6 months ago, I was living proof of that statement. At 33, I was pulling down 7 figures as a senior director at one of Austin's most prestigious consulting firms, owned a penthouse overlooking Lady Bird Lake, and had a calendar so full of networking events and board meetings that I needed 3 different assistants. Just to keep track of my schedule, I was also dying inside. Not literally, though some mornings I wondered if that might be easier. No, I was experiencing something far more insidious. The slow suffocation of a soul trapped in a life that looked perfect from the outside, but felt like a beautifully decorated prison cell. Every morning, I'd wake up in my Egyptian cotton sheets, slip into another designer suit, and drive my Tesla to another day of optimizing profit margins for companies that already had more money than they knew what to do with. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, helping other people maximize their potential while completely ignoring my own. But everything changed on a Saturday morning in October when I decided to do something I hadn't done in years, absolutely. Nothing productive. No client calls, no strategic planning sessions, no charity galas that were really just networking opportunities in expensive dresses. Just me, a cup of coffee, and whatever the day might bring. That's how I ended up at the East Austin flea market, wandering between stalls, selling everything from vintage vinyl to handmade jewelry, feeling more relaxed than I had in months. The morning sun was warm on my face, and for the first time in forever, I wasn't checking my phone every 30 seconds. That's when I saw her. She was at a booth selling adaptive sports equipment, her wheelchair positioned behind a table displaying racing gloves, specialized bottles, and gear I couldn't begin to identify. But it wasn't the equipment that stopped me in my tracks. It was her. She had shoulder-length auburn hair that caught the sunlight like fire, and when she laughed at something, a customer said, the sound was so genuine and guarded that it made something in my chest ache with recognition. This was what joy looked like. This was what I'd been missing. I found myself walking toward her booth without conscious decision, drawn by something I couldn't name but couldn't resist. As I got closer, I could see the definition in her arms and shoulders, the easy confidence with which she maneuvered her racing wheelchair, the way she engaged with every person who stopped by with complete presence and attention. She looked up as I approached, and her eyes met. Green. Her eyes were the deepest shade of green I'd ever seen, like forests after rain, and when she smiled at me, I felt something shift inside my chest, a door opening that I hadn't even realized. Was locked. Looking for anything specific? She asked, her voice warm with genuine curiosity rather than the practiced friendliness of someone trying to make a sale. I gestured vaguely at the equipment displayed on her table, suddenly feeling foolish. I'm not really sure. I don't know much about any of this, actually. Her smile widened, and I noticed the small scar above her left eyebrow that somehow made her even more beautiful. Well, you've come to the right place for a crash course. I'm Erica, by the way. Erica Martinez. Lauren, I managed, extending my hand. When she took it, her grip was firm and warm, and I held on just a moment longer than strictly necessary. Lauren Ross. Nice to meet you, Lauren Ross, she said, and something about the way she said my name made it sound like music. So what brings you to my little corner of athletic obsession? I should have given her my standard response, something polished and noncommittal about supporting local businesses or being interested in fitness. Instead, I found myself telling the truth. Honestly, I was walking around aimlessly because I realized I couldn't remember the last time I did something just because I wanted to. Not because it was strategically advantageous or would impress someone important. And then I saw you, and you looked so alive. I wanted to know what that felt like. The words hung in the air between us, far more vulnerable than I'd intended. I braced myself for the polite brush-off, the gentle redirect to safer conversational territory. Instead, Erica leaned forward slightly, studying my face with those incredible green eyes. That's the most honest thing anyone said to me in weeks. When's the last time you felt alive, Lauren? The question hit me like a physical blow. When was the last time? I couldn't remember. Couldn't even approximate. I don't know, I whispered. Well, Erica said, her voice soft but determined. Maybe it's time to find out. What happened next changed the trajectory of my entire life. Instead of making a polite excuse and walking away, which would have been the safe, reasonable thing to do, I found myself accepting Erica's invitation to grab coffee after she finished at the market. We went to a little cafe on Isis Chavez, where the baristas knew Erica by name and the coffee came in mismatched vintage mugs instead of branded paper cups. Everything about the place was the opposite of the sterile corporate environments I was used to, and I loved it immediately. "So, Lauren Ross," Erica said, settling her wheelchair at her small table by the window. "What do you do when you're not having existential crises at flea markets?" I laughed, despite myself. "I'm a senior director at Meridian Consulting. We help companies optimize their operational efficiency and maximize profit potential." "Wow, that sounds..." She paused, clearly searching for a diplomatic way to phrase her response. "Soul-crushingly boring," I supplied. "I was going to say financially rewarding," she grinned. "But yeah, kind of boring too." "Do you like it?" The question was so simple, so direct, that it took me off guard. In my world, career satisfaction was measured in terms of advancement opportunities, compensation packages, and professional recognition. No one ever asked if you actually liked what you did. "I'm good at it," I said finally. "That's not what I asked." I stared into my coffee, watching the steam rise in delicate spirals. "No," I admitted. "I don't like it. I haven't liked it in years, maybe ever. But I'm 33 years old, and I've built this entire life around it. I don't know how to be anything else." Erica was quiet for a moment, and when I looked up, her expression was thoughtful rather than pitying. "Can I tell you something? 5 years ago, I was a completely different person. I was working in tech, pulling 60-hour weeks, living for the next promotion, the next salary bump, the next external validation that I was successful. Then I had my accident." She gestured casually at her wheelchair, but I could see the weight of memory in her eyes. "Car accident on I-35. Drunk driver ran a red light. When I woke up in the hospital 6 weeks later, the doctors told me I'd never walk again. And you know what my first thought was? It wasn't about my legs or my mobility or even my independence. It was about my job. How was I going to explain the gap in my employment history? How would this affect my career trajectory?" She shook her head, smiling ruefully. "It took me months of physical therapy and even more months of therapy to realize that the accident didn't ruin my life. It saved me from a life that was ruining me. The person I was before, she was already broken. She just didn't know it yet." I felt tears prick my eyes, recognizing something fundamental in her words. "What changed?" "I discovered racing," she said, and her entire face lit up. "Paralympic racing. The first time I got in a racing chair and felt that speed, that freedom, that sense of my body doing exactly what I trained it to do, ... it was like waking up from a dream I didn't know I was having. I remembered what it felt like to be passionate about something, to work toward a goal that mattered to me, not to some corporate hierarchy. And now I train 6 hours a day. One, compete internationally. I run camps for kids with disabilities who think their lives are over because they can't do things the way they used to. And yeah, I make a fraction of what I used to make in tech, but Lauren ... She reached across the table and touched my hand. "I've never been happier." The contact sent electricity up my arm. Not just physical attraction, though that was definitely present, but something deeper, recognition, connection, the sense that this person understood something fundamental about me that I was only beginning to understand about myself. "I don't know how to do that," I said quietly. "I don't know how to blow up my entire life and start over." "Who says you have to blow it up?" Erica asked. "Maybe you just need to find the part of it that's actually yours." We talked for 3 more hours. About her training regimen and upcoming competitions. About my college dreams of becoming a teacher that I'd abandoned for the financial security of consulting. About the way cities look different when you experience them from a wheelchair versus behind the wheel of a luxury car. About books and movies and the weird little things that made us laugh. By the time we parted ways, I had her number in my phone and plans to meet her at the Paralympic Training Center the following weekend. More importantly, I had something I hadn't experienced in years: anticipation. I was actually looking forward to something. That night, I stood in my penthouse looking out at the Austin skyline, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I wondered what else might be possible. The Central Texas Paralympic Training Center was nothing like I'd expected. I'd imagined something sterile and medical, all white walls and institutional efficiency. Instead, I found a converted warehouse buzzing with energy, filled with adaptive equipment I couldn't begin to identify, and the sounds of serious athletes pushing their bodies to the limit. Erica met me at the entrance wearing workout clothes that showed off arms that could probably bench press more than I weighed. And when she smiled at me, I felt that same electrical jolt I'd experienced at the cafe. Ready for the tour? She asked. Ready was probably an overstatement, but I nodded anyway. She led me through the facility, explaining the different training areas with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely loved what they did. The pool where swimmers worked on technique with coaches who demonstrated strokes from poolside wheelchairs. The track where racers pushed themselves through interval training that made my own gym workouts look like gentle strolls. The weight room where athletes transferred from wheelchairs to specialized benches with fluid grace that spoke of countless hours of practice. The misconception most people have, Erica explained as we watched a swimmer complete a butterfly stroke that would have impressed Olympic athletes, is that Paralympic sports are somehow lesser versions of real sports. But these athletes train just as hard, compete just as fiercely, and push their bodies to the same limits as any Olympian. Sometimes further because they're working with bodies that require creative solutions to achieve peak performance. I watched a basketball scrimmage where the speed and precision of play made my head spin. How fast are those wheelchairs moving? Racing chairs can hit speeds over 25 miles per hour, Erica said with obvious pride. In competition, we're not just racing against each other, we're racing against physics, against the limitations people assume our bodies have, against every voice that ever told us we couldn't. Something in her tone made me look at her more closely. Is that what drives you? Proving people wrong? Her expression grew thoughtful. At first, yeah. I was angry for a long time after the accident. Angry at the drunk driver, angry at my body. Angry at a world that suddenly seemed designed to exclude me. But anger only gets you so far. Eventually, I realized I wasn't racing against other people's expectations. I was racing toward my own potential. She turned to face me fully, and the intensity in her green eyes made my breath catch. The same way you're not really trapped by your job or your lifestyle or any of the external things you think are holding you back. You're being held back by your own assumptions about what's possible. Before I could respond, we were interrupted by a man in his 50s approaching, in a wheelchair that had clearly seen better days. Erica, there you are, he said, but his tone was tense rather than friendly. We need to talk. Erica's entire demeanor shifted, her relaxed openness replaced by alert concern. Marcus, what's wrong? Marcus glanced at me uncertainly. Maybe. We should talk privately. It's okay, Erica said. Lauren, this is Marcus Chun, our head coach. Marcus Lauren Ross. I shook his hand, noting the worried lines around his eyes. Nice to meet you, Mr. Chun. Likewise, he said distractedly, then turned back to Erica. I got a call from Tokyo. There's been another incident. Same pattern as the ones in London. In Sydney, Erica went very still. What kind of incident? Unexpected performance variations. Athletes who've been training at peak levels suddenly having off days during major competitions, and afterward, nobody can explain what happened. I felt like I was missing crucial context, but the tension between them was palpable. I'm sorry, I don't understand. What kind of incidents are you talking about? Marcus looked at Erica, who nodded slightly. There have been some irregularities in recent Paralympic competitions. Athletes performing well below their established baselines, usually in events where significant betting action is involved. The corporate strategist in me immediately grasped the implications. You think someone's fixing competitions? We think someone's found a way to manipulate athletic performance in ways that are difficult to detect, Marcus said grimly. The question is how and whether it's going to affect our athletes here. Erica's jaw was tight with anger. If someone's targeting Paralympic athletes, thinking we're easy marks because we're not mainstream sports, ... double quotes. Hey, Marcus said gently. We don't know that's what's happening yet, but I wanted you to be aware, especially with nationals coming up. After Marcus left, Erica was quiet for a long time. We sat in the empty cafe area of the training center, the sounds of ongoing workouts echoing around us. This is what I was talking about, she said finally. The assumption that we're somehow less than, that Paralympic sports don't matter as much, so they're fair game for corruption. I reached across the table and took her hand, noting how she didn't pull away. What are you going to do? I don't know, she admitted, but I can't just pretend. It's not happening. These athletes work too hard, sacrifice too much, to have their achievements stolen by people who see us as easy targets. Looking at her in that moment, jaw set with determination, eyes bright with protective fury, I felt something shift inside me that had nothing to do with attraction and everything to do with admiration. This was someone who fought for things that mattered. Someone who channeled her passion into making the world better rather than just making herself richer. Someone I wanted to be like. What if you didn't have to handle it alone? I heard myself say. Erica looked at me with surprise. What do you mean? I mean, I spend my days analyzing complex systems and identifying inefficiencies and irregularities. I have resources, connections, investigative experience. What if we looked into this together? Lauren, you don't understand what you'd be getting into. If there really is organized corruption involved, then maybe it's time I did something that mattered, I interrupted. Maybe it's time I used my skills for something other than helping rich people get richer. Erica studied my face for a long moment, and I could see her weighing the offer against her protective instincts. It could be dangerous, she said finally. So could spending the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I'd been brave enough to try. She smiled then, the first real smile I'd seen from her since Marcus delivered his news. Okay, she said, but if we're doing this, we're doing it right. No rushing in without a plan, no unnecessary risks. Agreed, I said, though I was already mentally cataloging the resources I could bring to bear on the problem. And Lauren? Erica's voice was softer now, almost vulnerable. Thank you for caring enough to want to help. I squeezed her hand, feeling the strength in her fingers. Thank you for giving me something worth caring about. Over the next 2 weeks, I found myself spending every free moment at the training center. Officially, I was there to help Erica and Marcus investigate the potential competition fixing scandal. Unofficially, I was there because being around Erica made me feel more like myself than I had in years. I used my corporate connections to quietly investigate the financial backgrounds of key figures in Paralympic sports administration. I analyzed competition data looking for statistical anomalies that might indicate manipulation. I even hired a private investigator I'd worked with on corporate cases to look into the betting patterns around the suspicious competitions. But mostly, I watched Erica train. There was something mesmerizing about seeing her in her element. The way she approached, her racing chair like a dancer approaching a partner, the fluid precision with which she transferred from her everyday wheelchair to the specialized equipment, the fierce concentration on her face as she pushed herself through interval training that would have killed me in minutes. You don't have to stay for every practice session, she said one evening as we shared Thai takeout in the empty training center. I'm sure you have better things to do with your time. I looked around at the quiet facility, at this woman who was systematically rewiring my entire understanding of strength and beauty and purpose, and shook my head. Actually, I can't think of anywhere I'd rather be. Erica set down her pad thai and gave me a look I couldn't quite interpret. Lauren, can I ask you something? Of course. Why are you really here? And don't say it's just about the investigation. You could be doing that research from your office or your penthouse or wherever it is you usually work. But you're here every day, watching me sweat through training sessions and listening to Marcus complain about equipment maintenance. Why? The question hung in the air between us, loaded with implications I wasn't sure I was ready to confront. But something about the way she was looking at me, direct, honest, without judgment, made me want to try. Because I started, then stopped, searching for words that would capture something I barely understood myself. Because when I'm here, I remember what it feels like to be inspired. You asked me when I last felt alive, and the honest answer is that I'm starting to feel alive again, and it's because of you. Erica was very still, her green eyes fixed on my face. Not just because you're beautiful, I continued, feeling heat rise in my cheeks, but pushing forward anyway, though you absolutely are. But because you're passionate about something bigger than yourself. Because you fight for people who need someone to fight for them. Because you took something that could have destroyed you and turned it into something that makes you stronger. I took a shaky breath. I've spent the last decade optimizing profit margins and maximizing shareholder value, and I'm good at it, but it never made me feel like I was contributing anything meaningful to the world. Being here, helping with this investigation, watching. You train for something that matters to you. It's the first time in years I felt like I might actually be capable of doing something important. The silence stretched between us, and I began to worry I revealed too much. Pushed too hard, scared her off with the intensity of feelings. I was still trying to understand myself. Then Erica reached across the table and cupped my face with her palm, her thumb tracing along my cheekbone with a tenderness that made my heart skip. Lauren, she said softly, I need you to know something. The reason I look forward to seeing you here every day isn't just because you're helping with the investigation, though that means more to me than you know. It's because you see me. Not the wheelchair, not the athlete, not the inspiration born, that people sometimes want to make Paralympic competitors into. You see me. Before I could respond, she leaned forward and kissed me. Soft at first, tentative, giving me the chance to pull away if I wanted to. But pulling away was the last thing on my mind. I kissed her back, my hand finding the back of her neck, fingers tangling in her auburn hair. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. I should probably mention, Erica said, her forehead resting against mine, that I don't usually get involved with people I'm working with. I should probably mention, I replied, that I don't usually get involved with anyone. I've been too busy climbing corporate ladders to have time for actual relationships. Well then, she smiled, I guess we're both breaking new ground. That night, I went home to my penthouse feeling like I was floating 6 inches off the ground. But as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep despite my exhaustion, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the edge of something that would change everything. Not just the investigation, though that was certainly gaining momentum, something bigger. Something that would require me to decide who I wanted to be, not just who I'd accidentally become. The breakthrough came 3 weeks later, buried in financial records that had taken considerable resources and creative interpretation of client confidentiality agreements to obtain. I was in my downtown office, surrounded by printouts and laptops, displaying spreadsheets that would have looked like gibberish to most people when I found it. A shell company called Meridian Athletic Consulting, close enough to my own firm's name to make me wonder if it was intentional, had been making strategic investments in betting markets around Paralympic competitions, always small enough to fly under regulatory radar, always timed to maximize returns based on unexpected performance variations. But what really caught my attention was the pattern of pharmaceutical purchases, compounds that could potentially affect athletic performance, but in ways that would be difficult to detect with standard drug testing protocols. I was so absorbed in tracing the financial connections that I didn't notice Erica entering my office until she spoke. Please tell me you've been eating something other than coffee and determination, she said, setting a bag from our favorite Thai place on my desk. I looked up, realizing for the first time that it was dark outside. What time is it? 8:30 p.m. Marcus said you missed the training session we had scheduled, so I thought I'd check on you. She maneuvered her wheelchair closer to my desk, studying the chaos of papers and screens. Please tell me this mess means you found something. I found something, I confirmed, turning my laptop screen toward her. But you're not going to like it. I walked her through what I'd discovered. The betting patterns, the shell company, the pharmaceutical purchases. But the worst part was the connection I'd uncovered to several members of the International Paralympic Committee's Medical Advisory Board. They're not just fixing individual competitions, I explained. They're systematically targeting athletes they think are vulnerable, using compounds that would be almost impossible to detect without knowing exactly what to look for. Erica's face went through several emotions as she processed the information. Shock, anger, determination, and finally something that looked like fear. How widespread is this? She asked quietly. Based on the financial data, at least 12 major competitions over the past 3 years, and Lauren ... I hesitated, not wanting to deliver the next piece of news. There are transactions dated for next month, right around the time of nationals. Erica was quiet for a long moment, staring at the evidence spread across my desk. Then she looked up at me with those intense green eyes. We have to stop them. Erica, we need to be smart about this. These people have resources, connections, and clearly no moral boundaries. We should take what we found to the authorities and let them handle it. With what evidence? She challenged. Financial records that may or may not hold up in court. Circumstantial connections to pharmaceutical purchases that could have innocent explanations. By the time an official investigation Get started, nationals will be over, and they'll have moved on to the next target. I could see the logic in her argument, but something cold settled in my stomach. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we get the kind of evidence that can't be dismissed or explained away. Direct proof of what they're doing and how they're doing it. That sounds incredibly dangerous. Erica reached across the desk and took my hand. Lauren, these people are stealing from athletes who have already overcome more challenges than most people face in a lifetime. They're profiting off the assumption that Paralympic competitors don't matter enough for anyone to notice or care when competitions are manipulated. I can't just sit back and let that happen. Looking at her in that moment, I realized this was one of those defining choices that would determine not just the immediate outcome, but who I would be going forward. I could use my influence to convince her to take the safe route, to hand over our findings to the proper authorities and hope for the best. Or I could trust her judgment, support her courage, and help her fight for something that mattered. Okay, I said finally, but we do this together and we do it smart. No unnecessary risks, no going off on your own to play hero. Erica's smile was radiant. Deal, but you should know what you're agreeing to help with. It's going to require you to step pretty far outside your comfort zone. I thought about my comfort zone, corporate boardrooms, networking events, decisions based on risk analysis and profit optimization. Then I thought about the alternative, continuing to live a life that felt empty despite its outward success. Maybe it's time I found a new comfort zone, I said. Our plan was elegantly simple in theory and terrifyingly complex in execution. Based on the financial patterns I'd identified, we knew the corruption ring would likely target several high-profile athletes at the upcoming nationals. Our goal was to catch them in the act, document their methods, and gather evidence that would be impossible to dismiss or suppress. The key was Erica's willingness to put herself at risk by essentially becoming bait. The targeting seems to focus on athletes who are expected to perform well but aren't heavily favored to win. I explained during one of our late-night planning sessions at the training center. Athletes whose unexpected poor performance would generate significant betting profits without being so obvious as to attract immediate scrutiny. So athletes exactly like me, Erica said matter-of-factly. Which is why this is such a terrible idea, I replied for probably the 15th time. Marcus, who had initially been skeptical of our amateur detective work, had become a reluctant but valuable ally once he saw the evidence we'd compiled. The approach will likely be subtle, he said. Something introduced to food or drink, or possibly administered through equipment tampering. The key is that it has to be difficult to trace and even more difficult to prove intentional. We'd set up surveillance equipment throughout the training facility and arranged for discreet security at Erica's apartment. I'd use corporate contacts to ensure we had legal representation standing by and media connections ready to break the story once we had solid evidence. But despite all our preparations, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something crucial. 2 days before nationals, that feeling proved prophetic. I was leaving my office late when I noticed the black sedan that had been parked across the street when I arrived that morning was still there. Corporate paranoia, I told myself. But when the same car appeared in my rearview mirror during my drive home, paranoia started looking like reasonable caution. Instead of going to my penthouse, I drove to the training center, taking a circuitous route that confirmed I was being followed. By the time I arrived, my hands were shaking with adrenaline. Erica took one look at my face and wheeled over immediately. What happened? I told her about the surveillance, about the growing certainty that we'd been discovered. Maybe we should call this off, I said. If they know we're investigating ... Then we're running out of time, Erica interrupted. If they're watching you, it means they're getting ready to move. We can't back down now. Marcus appeared from his office, drawn by the tension in our voices. When we explained the situation, his expression grew grim. There's something I haven't told you, he said. I've been getting pressure from the Paralympic Committee to withdraw certain athletes from nationals. Budget concerns, they said. Training readiness questions. But the athletes they're targeting match the profile of previous victims. I finished, exactly, including Erica. The three of us looked at each other, the weight of what we were facing settling around us like fog. So what do? I asked. Erica's jaw was set with familiar determination. We spring the trap before. They can spring theirs. What happened next unfolded with the surreal intensity of a nightmare you can't wake up from. Based on our analysis, we knew the corruption ring would make their move the night before competition began, when athletes would be focused on final preparations and security would be at its most routine. We were right, but we underestimated their boldness. I was at the competition hotel, ostensibly attending a sponsor reception, while actually monitoring communications from the surveillance equipment we placed. Erica was in her room, wired with recording devices and under discreet protection from a security team I'd hired. At 9:47 p.m., everything went wrong. "Lauren," Erica's voice came through my earpiece, tight with tension. "Someone's at my door. Says they're from Competition Medical. Need to do a final health check." I was already moving toward the elevators. "Don't open it. Medical checks don't happen in hotel rooms. They're saying it's mandatory, that I'll be disqualified if I refuse." Through my earpiece, I could hear knocking becoming more insistent, voices becoming more authoritative. I jabbed the elevator button repeatedly, knowing I wouldn't make it to her floor in time. "Erica, whatever they say, don't let them in. I'm coming. Lauren, ... Her voice was different now, scared in a way I'd never heard from her. There are more of them. They're not just asking anymore. The elevator doors finally opened, and I rushed inside, frantically pressing the button for her floor. Through the earpiece, I heard her door opening, heard voices that were professional but carried an undercurrent of threat. "Ms. Martinez, we really do need to complete this examination. It won't take long." "I'd prefer to have my coach present," Erica replied, but I could hear the strain in her voice. "I'm afraid that's not possible. This is a confidential medical matter." The elevators seemed to be moving through molasses. I called Marcus, then hotel security, then the private investigators I'd hired, but I knew none of them would reach her. In time, when the elevator doors finally opened on her floor, I ran down the hallway just as her door was closing. I could hear voices inside, Erica protesting, someone telling her to relax, that this would only take a moment. I didn't think, I just acted. I pounded on the door. "Erica, open up." Silence from inside, then hushed urgent conversation. "Hotel security," I called, hoping my voice carried enough authority to be convincing. "We need to speak with you immediately." The door opened a crack, revealing a man in medical scrubs who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "I'm sorry, there's been a misunderstanding. We're conducting a routine medical evaluation." I pushed past him into the room where I found Erica in her wheelchair, looking pale but alert, surrounded by 3 people in medical clothing who definitely weren't medical personnel. "Lauren," Erica said, relief evident in her voice. "These people were just leaving." One of the fake medical personnel, a woman with cold eyes and an expensive handbag that didn't match her scrubs, stepped forward. "Ms. Ross, I believe. You've been quite thorough in your research." The fact that she knew my name sent ice through my veins. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I think you do." She reached into her bag and I tensed, but she only pulled out a tablet computer. "You've been very busy investigating financial records, making inquiries about pharmaceutical purchases, asking questions that have made some very important people quite uncomfortable." She turned the tablet toward me, showing surveillance photos of me entering various buildings, meeting with the private investigators, even sitting with Erica at the training center. "The thing is," she continued conversationally, "we can't have that kind of scrutiny interfering with our business operations. So we're going to need you to stop, both of you." "And if we don't?" Erica asked, her voice steady despite the circumstances. The woman smiled, and it was one of the most chilling expressions I'd ever seen. "Well, accidents happen. Especially to athletes who push their bodies to extremes. Equipment failures, medical emergencies during competition. These things are tragic, but not entirely unexpected in high-performance sports." I felt something hot and fierce rise in my chest. "You're threatening her." "I'm explaining reality," the woman replied. "You've stumbled into something much bigger. Then you understand, and you have 2 choices. Walk away now, forget what you think you've discovered, and everyone stays healthy. Or continue with your amateur investigation and face the consequences." I looked at Erica, seeing the same determination in her eyes that I felt in my own chest. "We come too far to back down now." "There's a third option," I said, pulling out my phone. "The one where I send the evidence we've already compiled to every journalist, law enforcement agency, and Paralympic official I can reach. All at once right now." The woman's expression shifted, confidence replaced by calculation. "You're bluffing? Am I?" I held up my phone, finger hovering over the send button. "Erica, what was that quote about having nothing to lose?" Erica smiled, and despite everything, it was radiant. That's when you become dangerous. For a moment, the room was frozen in tension. Then hotel security arrived, responding to the calls I'd made in the elevator, followed closely by the private security team, and finally by Marcus and what appeared to be half the coaching staff from the training center. In the chaos that followed, fake medical personnel trying to explain their presence, real security trying to sort out what was happening, Erica and me trying to provide coherent explanations while still processing what had just occurred. The woman with the cold eyes and her associates managed to slip away, but they left behind something crucial: the tablet computer she'd been using to show us the surveillance photos. Lauren, Erica said quietly as hotel security took statements and Marcus coordinated with actual Paralympic medical officials. We need to get that tablet to someone who can extract its data. I nodded, already mentally cataloging which of my CORPORATE contacts had the necessary technical expertise. But first, we need to make sure you're safe. They made it clear this isn't over. No, Erica said firmly. First, we make sure this evidence gets into the right hands before they realize what they left behind. My safety doesn't matter if we lose the chance to stop them. Looking at her in that moment, disheveled, shaken, but absolutely determined to see this through, I felt something shift in my chest that was deeper than attraction, stronger than admiration. This was love, not the comfortable, convenient kind I'd imagined I might find someday with an appropriate partner from my social circle, but the fierce, transformative kind that makes you want to be better than you ever thought possible. Your safety matters to me, I said quietly. Her green eyes softened. I know, and that's exactly why we have to finish this. The tablet computer proved to be a treasure trove of incriminating evidence. My contact in corporate cybersecurity, a woman who specialized in forensic data recovery and owed me several favors from previous consulting projects, worked through the night to extract its contents. What she found exceeded our most optimistic expectations. Financial records detailing payments to corrupt officials, correspondence outlining which athletes to target and how, purchase orders for pharmaceutical compounds designed to cause temporary performance degradation without triggering standard drug tests. Even video recordings of previous operations showing the systematic corruption of Paralympic competitions, dating back 5 years. This is enough to bring down the entire network, I told Erica as we reviewed the evidence in a secure conference room at my law firm, surrounded by attorneys who specialized in whistleblower protection and sports law. Not just the people who threatened you last night, but the officials who've been enabling this, the betting syndicates profiting from it, even the pharmaceutical suppliers. Erica was studying video footage of athletes being unknowingly dosed with performance-inhibiting drugs, her expression a mixture of fury and heartbreak. Look at their faces, she said quietly. These are people who've trained their entire lives for these moments, and these bastards stole it from them. Not just the competitions, but the knowledge that their performance was their own. Marcus, who had insisted on being present despite the legal risks, shook his head grimly. Some of these athletes never competed again after these incidents. They thought they were losing their edge, that their bodies were failing them. They retired thinking they weren't good enough anymore. The weight of what we were seeing settled over the room like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just about competition fixing or financial fraud. It was about the systematic destruction of dreams, the theft of achievements that could never be returned. So what happens now? I asked the lead attorney, a sharp woman named Jennifer Walsh, who had handled several high-profile corruption cases. Now we coordinate a simultaneous release of this evidence to law enforcement agencies in multiple countries, to Paralympic governing bodies, and to journalists who can ensure the story gets the attention it deserves, she replied. But there's something you both need to understand. Once we do this, you'll be targets. Not just from the people directly involved in the corruption, but from everyone who benefits from keeping Paralympic sports marginalized and easy to exploit. Erica and I looked at each other. I could see the same resolve in her eyes that I felt in my own chest. Then we'd better make sure the evidence is so overwhelming that they can't silence us without proving our point. Erica said, Paralympic Committee announces emergency investigation. I read from my laptop. International betting companies suspend wagering on adaptive sports. 3 pharmaceutical executives arrested in Switzerland. Erica was on the couch beside me, fielding calls from reporters, athletes, and Paralympic officials from around the world. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing since the story broke. No, I can't comment on the ongoing investigation, she was saying to what sounded like the 15th journalist of the morning. But I will say that Paralympic athletes deserve the same integrity and competition that any athlete expects. We train just as hard, sacrifice just as much, and our achievements should be just as respected. When she finally hung up, I reached over and took her hand. How are you holding up, honestly? I'm exhausted and terrified and exhilarated all at the same time, she admitted. Part of me can't believe we actually did it. Part of me is waiting for the other shoe to drop. The other shoe? Lauren, we just exposed a multi-million-dollar international corruption ring. These people aren't going to just accept defeat and move on. They're going to fight back, and when they do, it's going to get ugly. She was right, of course. Over the next week, we faced a coordinated campaign designed to discredit both our evidence and our motivations. Social media bots spread rumors about Erica's competitive record and my corporate background. Anonymous sources suggested we were seeking attention or financial gain. Several news outlets that had initially covered the story began running analysis pieces questioning whether the evidence was as conclusive as it appeared. But something unexpected happened. Instead of backing down, the Paralympic community rallied. Athletes who had experienced unexplained performance issues came forward with their stories. Coaches shared their suspicions about irregularities they'd witnessed. Even officials who had initially been defensive began cooperating with investigations. It's working, Marcus told us during one of our strategy meetings at the training center. Not just the legal proceedings, but the cultural shift. People are starting to take Paralympic sports seriously in a way they never have before. He was right. The corruption scandal had inadvertently become a spotlight on Paralympic athletics generally. Media coverage that had started as investigative. Reporting about corruption evolved into feature stories about the incredible athleticism, dedication, and achievements of Paralympic competitors. Erica's phone calls shifted from defensive interviews about the scandal to excited conversations about sponsorship opportunities, media coverage of upcoming competitions, and invitations to speak at events about integrity in sports. This is what I never expected, she told me one evening as we walked. Well, as I walked and she rolled around the lake near the training center. I thought exposing the corruption would be the end goal, but it's turned into something bigger. People are actually paying attention to what we do, not just as a novelty or inspiration porn, but as legitimate athletics. I squeezed her hand, marveling at how natural it had become to coordinate our different modes of movement, to navigate the world as a team. So what happens next? Next, I train for the rescheduled nationals. Next, I compete knowing that my performance will actually be my own. Next, I hope that other athletes get the same opportunity. She paused, looking out over the water where the sunset was painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. And next, I figure out what this thing between us is going to be long term. My heart skipped. We'd been so focused on the investigation and its aftermath that we hadn't talked about the future, about what would happen once the crisis passed. And we had to decide whether what we built together could survive in ordinary circumstances. What do you want it to be? I asked. Erica turned to face me, her green eyes serious. I want it to be real. Not just the intensity of what we've been through, but something that can grow and change and last. But Lauren, that means you're going to have to decide who you want to be. Not just during a crisis, but day to day. I knew what she meant. The person I'd been 6 months ago, focused solely on corporate advancement, measuring success in terms of financial achievement, living a life that looked impressive from the outside but felt empty from within. That person couldn't sustain a relationship with someone like Erica, but the person I discovered myself to be over the past months, someone willing to fight for things that mattered, someone who found meaning in service rather than just success, someone capable of courage when the situation demanded it. That person might be worthy of what Erica was offering. I've been thinking about that a lot, I admitted, about who I want to be going forward. And I took a deep breath, feeling like I was about to make the most important decision of my life. I want to be someone who uses her skills for things that matter, someone who fights for people who need someone to fight for them, someone who builds things instead of just optimizing them. Erica's smile was radiant. That sounds like someone I'd like to get to know better. Good, I said, leaning down to kiss her as the sunset painted everything around us in warm light, because I think you're going to be seeing a lot of her.